All right, today we will be talking about how Michael Saylor, which I assume all of you know, basically now a fund manager, although it is technically a company, MicroStrategy, that used to sell or maybe still sells business intelligence enterprise software, but now it's essentially just a Bitcoin treasury fund, or they even use it for leverage, and they've created multiple financial instruments from this by collateralizing debt or whatever. The point remains, he has attracted $4.2 billion of capital for his Bitcoin fund. And frankly, now he's like pretty much known as the king of crypto, or king of Bitcoin at the very least. And I don't think that there's any opposition to that label. Today, we're going to reverse engineer what he did, whether he did it on purpose or not, to attract all this capital so that you, my friends, can do the same thing. Maybe not billions of dollars, but hey, all we need is like 100 M's, right? And if you don't know who I am, per usual, you shouldn't. But I've created my own personal brands, multiple channels, over 100,000 subscribers, creating authority and strategic online presence so that I could sell my services on the back end, in addition to co-founding and working within other channels, totaling over 5 million subscribers. So I know what I'm talking about. All it takes is a little bit of work and a little bit of know-how on how to build a strategic online following, not necessarily to become famous, but getting the right audience to be able to attract you more capital. All you need is 1 or 2 people from your audience to give you money and you're already set, right? Everything else after that is just scaling it more and more. So anyway, back to Michael Saylor. What exactly did he do to attract all of this money? If we do a simple YouTube search of Michael Saylor, you've probably already seen hundreds, if not even thousands of clips of Michael Saylor on various platforms, whether it be cable, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter, everywhere. You cannot escape this man if you are a fan of Bitcoin and that narrative. And what's really interesting about this case study is that Michael Saylor doesn't actually have any podcast or hosting any channel of his own. He always goes on other people's platforms, which actually makes it easier because maybe he created a, podcast production studio within his office and or home. But at the same time, he doesn't have to build his presence within his own channel. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody else, because you should be in control of your own audience and have them at your discretion, where when you post content, they go to your platform. It just makes it easier to convey your message at a whim. However, with Michael Saylor, he had a little bit of an advantage over other people because he was already a major CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and therefore platforms, whether that be cable or YouTube podcasts, they were already willing to have him on to speak because he's already a reputable player. However, for you and me, we have to create our own platforms on YouTube and other social media platforms to get to the point where we can go on other people's podcasts and they will actually allow us to speak and acquire some of their already built following that likely has some shared characteristics with your message. But even with that being said, if you're starting from zero, you can still do the same thing to jumpstart your following on your podcast or social media platforms, because you can target podcasts with maybe 100 subscribers, 200, 300, and then we can repurpose that for our own channel too, because people don't really care if you use clips from their podcast and post on theirs, because it's just cross promotion, right? It doesn't take away any of their views. Their followers already saw it. It's actually just amplifying their podcast too to attract more followers to them, especially if you title and make a different thumbnail for your videos. And as you can see on multiple of these platforms, Savvy Finance, 91,000 views, BTC Sessions, 72K views. This one, he gave a talk at the Bitcoin 2025 Las Vegas conference, 634,000 views. This is possible for you. Maybe not to this same degree because there's only one Michael Saylor. However, when you build a following, you will also be invited to different conferences. It might not be that large of a conference, but you continually just build your following up to the point where you do get invited to do this and potentially even paid to acquire more funding too, because you're talking to a audience of say 3,000 people. You don't think one of those people is going to be interested in connecting with you, especially you showing your authority that you're on stage talking about a given subject? You're probably going to be the go-to person outside in the hallways of that conference that people are going to seek to speak with and give you their card. But how exactly do you do this? Because that seems like a very large feat. How do I become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and get invited to all these podcasts? Because now he doesn't even have to reach out to podcasts. People want to talk to him. He gets brought on CNBC and Fox News and everywhere, but we're not there yet. Well, you have to craft a narrative. You have to have an interesting message that other people don't have, or at least a different spin on, so that it will get them views, because they're not going to invite you on their podcast if it's not valuable to their audience or beneficial to them too. It's just like any other business venture. You give value, somebody gives you value back. In Michael Saylor's case, he happens to always be talking about Bitcoin. The message never changes. So every time anybody even thinks about Bitcoin, all of these rich people who have a ton of capital that want to allocate it somewhere, especially after listening to countless clips from Michael Saylor on TV and on YouTube and TikTok, everywhere, they were looking for ways to double down, potentially with leverage, on Bitcoin and the narrative that he was teaching them about already, because he became an expert by studying the whole Bitcoin narrative. And that's all he spoke about. And so he became the go-to person for people to invest into. And now it's not even just people, it's institutions that are sending him money or investing into MicroStrategy, among the other financial instruments that he's created, like Stark or whatever they're called. So before going into these podcasts, you got to know exactly what is the subject matter of these podcasts, and how exactly can you spin that narrative that they already have with your own to connect the dots with that audience, and then hopefully also bring them over to your podcast and or social medias. Now, the next step would be targeting these exact podcasts. How do you do that? Where do you find them? Well, it's literally just as simple as typing in, I already did it, Bitcoin podcast, at least in Michael Saylor's case study. Because YouTube, I don't know how many channels they have. I believe it's millions upon millions, maybe 100 million at least. We've got 8 billion people on this planet. It's the largest long form video content center on the internet and in the world. And so all you do is search whatever subject you're looking for. You don't even have to put podcasts. You can just put Bitcoin, because not every channel that you want to potentially speak to or speak on is a podcast or labels themselves as such. So whatever, I did Bitcoin podcast. We go down here, we're going to find a ton of channels. Literally, there are podcasts called The Bitcoin Podcast with Walker or British Hodl. You don't think this guy would love, at 50,000 subscribers, to have Michael Saylor on his platform? He would salivate at the chance of that. Keep going down. Iced Coffee Hour clips. The Iced Coffee Hour is by Graham Stephan, who has millions of followers. Maybe that's out of reach right now, but what we can do also is go to the top and do filters and do channels, and we can find platforms that don't have too many subscribers. So say we're just starting out. We go down to Live from Bitcoin Beach, El Salvador. There's 8K subscribers right there. 9K for the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. 30K. I still think that that's small enough where anybody can really go on there if you have a great narrative that you can create for their podcast, because people are always searching to have great content no matter who you are on their channel. 1000X podcast, 9.7K subscribers. You get the point. There's a ton of different channels that you could feature on. Now, as I was telling you before, Michael Saylor doesn't have to do this because he's already a Fortune 500 CEO. So why would he form his own podcast when people already want him on theirs or on their cable channel networks? And so his message is going to be conveyed regardless if he has a channel or not. However, for you and me, for fund managers out there that may not have the personal brand that Michael Saylor already does, what is best to do in this scenario is to create your own channel as well, to create almost a funnel of sorts where you go on other channels, maybe 10 different ones, while also posting your own content so that you can share audiences. That's the best way. Instead of relying solely upon the algorithm, where it actually takes potentially days, weeks, months to get the proper view time, subscribers, and nail your thumbnail and title combos down because every channel is different. Now you can just skip ahead by getting on 10 different podcasts with 10,000 subscribers each of different people across the world, and they'll probably even shout out your podcast or channel too, where those people, if they want to hear your different analyses on different topics within the same niche, of course, they can go to your channel. And then, hey, maybe with 10 of these different 10,000 subscriber channels, you get 100 people each, maybe even 10. At minimum, that's still 100 new subscribers that you got right off of just one sprint of going on guest podcasts. And then the last step that we always talk about is amplify your message. What this means exactly is we're going to take our long form content. It doesn't even have to be on our channel. The ones that we guest appeared on, we can just download from YouTube these hour-long segments of each of these 10 channels that we featured on, cut them down into bite-sized pieces and post them on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. And already you're probably going to have at least 50 clips to use from just to put on your channel and all these platforms, which will get you minimum at least 10,000 views. Over time, of course, it's going to take time. That is, if you use all the strategies that I've taught you through various videos on this channel. And eventually, once you build enough of a following, or at least a name for yourself, conveying a similar message each time, you will then become an authority within your niche. Michael Saylor, over the last few years, since I want to say 2020, he's been on probably hundreds of different guest appearances. And now, as I said at the very beginning, he is known as the king of Bitcoin. He's the go-to person when you want someone to give an authoritative message about that investment strategy. And to relate back to your message, because maybe your fund has nothing to do with Bitcoin and you're in a completely different space that isn't necessarily as hot as the Bitcoin narrative. Let's say you are in SaaS startup funds. All you have to do is go into SaaS startup, different channels and podcasts, funnel them into your own content hosted on your platforms, post all of the short form clips on all of your various social media platforms. And yes, that niche might be a little bit smaller, maybe only a total of about 100,000 people, as opposed to Bitcoin, which probably has millions upon millions. But that probably even makes it a little bit easier given there's way less competition of people trying to fight for that narrative. Also, another lesson that I wanted to make sure that we covered is that you aren't just limited to cutting only short form vertical clips for all of your platforms. You can also cut longer form 10 to 15 different shorter subject-based content from the longer podcast. Say you filmed a podcast as a guest on someone else's channel that was an hour-long duration. You can probably take 6 different clips that are 10 minutes each, depending on where you started off and ended a certain subject that is within the greater narrative of whatever niche you're in. And you can post those to your YouTube along with all the shorts. So you'll probably get even more than 50 pieces of content with this method. Plus, not everybody wants to watch short form content because they want to hear all of the nuance and context of the subject. The short form is really just a teaser for the long form, where people actually gain that 100% trust in you as a fund manager of your expertise within that field. So in sum, all you really have to do is copy Michael Saylor with a little bit of extra work too by creating your own platform, because we are not Fortune 500 CEOs, but the limit is $4.2 billion of capital raised. And that's probably even going to increase within the years to come as more and more institutions start to flood into the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and DeFi space. So even if you just get a percentage of that, like even 0.5% of that, I can't do the math on the top of my head right now, but I know that that's literally millions just right there. And of course, I know this is a lot of information and a lot of work to do if you were to be by yourself. So this is what I do for fund managers, founders, LPs, to create a personal brand online for them to build their strategic online presence so they can get better deal flow, more capital, everything, more connections with people within their space, get more guest appearances in podcasts and in-person live events where they can become speakers. And it just makes everything easier when you have a following. And so if you're interested in working with me, yes, it is a premium service. And so you do have to apply to make sure that it's worth it for both of us. But just fill out this quick questionnaire, tell me about what you're doing, and I know we can build your strategic online presence just through doing a few simple things that my team will automate. I'll even fly to your office and or home so that we can set everything up, the done for you service. The link is in the description. Subscribe for more content. I will see y'all later.